share with people very often in my story that was the moment that I started thinking about not being here any longer.
Oh, wow.
Because it had gotten to that point in that moment of, who am I and what am I going to do if I'm not working?
Yeah. That's... Hey, Bloom fam. I'm Tay.
I'm Tosh.
And we are Living the Bloom. Today we have the beautiful Dr. Amber Gunner here with us.
Yeah, welcome, girl. Hey, girl. Hi.
Thank you.
Welcome. Dr. Amber is a workplace wellness consultant.
Yep.
And she is just really into supporting women in the workplace in the areas and spaces of wellness and psychological safety. Mm-hmm. And we are excited to have you here because it is a discussion that we actually just talked about without even thinking about it. I was telling her about a situation and I said it. Somebody said that they did not feel safe. And she was like, well, what do you mean? Like, did the lady try to threaten her or jump on her? And I was like, no. I think from an emotional and mental standpoint. So
absolutely.
Yes. So thank you for being here. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us your background. You're from H-Town.
I am from Houston. As we talked about, graduated Lamar High School. And then actually did a year at Howard University freshman year.
H-U.
I know. I was so adamant. That was the only school I applied to. And by Labor Day, I called my mom and was like, nope, it's not going to work.
Because you missed Houston?
Well, I will say this. When she sent me off to go visit senior year, I went with a friend that was a sophomore and we partied the whole time. So when I go back and I'm going to classes and you're in the thick of it, I was like, this is not for me. This is not it. So then transferred over to LSU, finished out my bachelor's there, did a master's at Dallas Baptist and transitioned kind of over into the education space. And then did a doctorate at the University of Houston, also in professional leadership. So
go cool.
Go cool. Yeah. She went to U of H undergrad.
Yeah,
I went
for
to
my
U of
master's
H for law school. So
look at that.
3 beautiful.
Yes, people. They did.
So that's the education part of things. But I really got started in this space. I talk a lot about when I was pregnant with my second kid. I was already working for a publishing company and gotten laid off from that. And it was around the same time that we found out that we were pregnant. And that kind of began my introduction into learning more about prenatal depression, which a lot of us don't talk about. We don't know about. We know postpartum, right? And that's becoming more and more conversation. But it was through that layoff that I'd found myself really deeply depressed. And a large part of that is because I identify so much with working. I enjoy it. I like being of service. And so there was immediately kind of like that identity crisis of like, who am I if I'm like not working unexpectedly at that? And it was a challenge because I knew that I was pregnant, but at that time, the weight of everything felt so heavy. And I did what I knew to do, which was I got to find another job. I've got to apply. I can't let this pull me under, right? And the more I tried to fight that, the more it actually did. And I share with people very often in my story that was the moment that I started thinking about not being here any longer.
Oh, wow.
Because it had gotten to that point in that moment of, who am I and what am I going to do if I'm not working?
That's, kudos to you for being transparent in that space, because I think that, I've seen, like with Kyron Lacey, LSU, right? The gentleman that, took his life recently. People don't talk about it still. even though we see it happening
They don't.
around us. And so for you to be vulnerable enough to share that you were in a space where that was a thought or a consideration is really, really important.
Absolutely.
Because many, many people, women in particular as well,
Yep.
feel like they're by themselves.
Yep.
And that this must be something I'm only experiencing. And feeling.
Right.
So
Yes.
hats off to you. Thank you for
Yes.
sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. And I've talked about it on my platforms as well. Young Black boys, the second killer for them is suicide.
Yeah.
And so it's becoming even more prevalent. And as, someone that has a son, it's even more important for me to stay mindful of just that silence around, I've got to be able to do it all on my own type of thing. And so that, having that experience of being faced with that, I say a lot of times that was the breaking point. That was the thing that broke me, because for a split second to even have that go across your mind, it's like something is wrong, and then I say often that was the hardest thing I had to do, which was call my then husband inside and say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. And I want to live. I want to be here, but we're going to need to get me some help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that well received?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, by the end of the week, we had me an appointment to go and see my OB, who also took it very seriously, listened. And that's where she made me aware of the prenatal depression, and was able to prescribe me some medication that was going to be safe for myself as well as my baby.
Yeah.
We went on from there and hired a doula, which I didn't do with the first one. And so that was just, it was a challenging and I think a really devastating moment and experience. But what it opened me up to thereafter, my life has not been the same, in the sense that, like I said, working with that doula and really getting connected with my body to start becoming aware of some of the signs of burnout that I'm sure we'll talk about, that you just don't even know are there because you're so much on autopilot.
Yes.
And as we continue having conversations about mental health, we've got to be in tune enough with ourselves to recognize what's going on so that we can then ask for the help.
I love that. I love that. So I see where your passion for it comes from, right? It's a really personal story.
Yeah.
And a very important story. And so again, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
For people that don't know what wellness is, before we get to burnout, just wellness, like we were talking, what does wellness mean to you? Like, how would you define wellness?
It can be a lot of things, and mostly focusing in on mental, spiritual, but also the physical.
Okay.
I think a lot of it kind of similar to what y'all were talking about earlier. It's like when we think about being safe, we think about the physical aspect, but also our mental and our spiritual well-being. All three of those are really needed to be holistic or whole overall.
Right.
So that's how I would look at wellness, are going to be those three aspects. And part of that journey has been growing those muscles in that mental and that spiritual so that the physical can be whole.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you, what is your approach to wellness? Like if you're talking to me about wellness, I'm getting close to burnout, and we'll talk about burnout more in a minute, but like, what would you be advising about in the space of wellness and being better, better version of yourself?
And I think too, my experience, I didn't think about the mental aspects of things. I'd had some traumatic experiences prior to that, but I wouldn't say that I led my life with my mental wellness first.
Okay.
And that really changed that. And so now it is very often I'd ask somebody, how are you checking in with yourself? Do you know when you feel irritable? Do you know when you feel exhausted? Are you really recognizing that? Yeah. Or are you saying, oh, I got to ignore that and I've got to keep going? Yes. So to answer that, it's kind of like, well, what is your relationship to what you're feeling in your body? Can you identify those things?
Right. What the triggers are even too.
Yes, to some extent, what your triggers are, but also just noticing those subtleties. that are happening within you. Oh, my mood just changed. Why did my mood change? Oh, it's because I'm worried about the money I spent yesterday. You know what I mean? And so it's like being able to be aware of those things, because physically we know when we have an ailment, right? If we hit our elbow, it's like, oh, that hurts. But when things happen mentally, we don't really take the time to kind of like run through it and see what that's about, get to the root of it and see what's underneath there.
Yeah. I think a lot of times people ask, like, especially in like a therapist will ask, like, how do you feel? Or how does it make you feel? And I think sometimes people just have a hard time even describing how they feel.
Yeah.
But like saying I'm irritated or but like those are things like we don't even really think through. And I hate that. I'm like, I don't know how I feel. I'm just mad.
Yes.
So I think it's really important, like what you were saying, to take a step back and think about like that process.
And when every time somebody, because I do a lot of coaching work, and anytime somebody says, I don't know, which is valid to not know, but we then take that sentence stem of like, well, in this moment, I started thinking blank, or I started feeling blank. Because what I tell people is similar to an athlete, you don't use the word can't. Right? It gives the brain permission to shut down. And so when we say, I don't know, it also is giving you that permission to be able to shut down. And it's okay to still, I'm processing, but what I can gather right now is this. You know?
I think it, like, along what you're saying, some tips to help people like even think through how they can communicate it would be great. I know I need it.
Yes.
I'm like, or maybe I need that wheel, that emotion wheel. Like, let's see. I think this is how I feel right here. This one.
Yes. And again, it's a muscle. Like you said, we are not adept to talking about a lot of the emotions and feelings culturally, but also in the Black community as well. You know what I mean? And so it is, people have to see it as a muscle that you're training. Even when we start talking about asking for help, like those first few rejections, they do sting a little bit. You know what I mean? But it's a muscle that it's like, oh, they can't do it. That's okay. I really want somebody that wants to be able to help me anyway. So let me see down my list who can be available to that, you know? So it's a muscle that we have to work. Part of that is also that communication of how we're coming across and then how we're receiving what's being communicated back to us as well.
How do we identify what's not normal? Because we're so used to putting on our capes and being the strong. Like, I'm not trying to be the strong person. Like, remove that title from me.
Absolutely.
And so how would you recommend for a woman to distinguish, like, this is not normal, right? Versus trying to take on that strong personality that we typically have where we're trying to take care of everything. Yes.
And I think the first thing is that I don't even question like whether this is normal for someone else. Like, is this normal for me? So that's the first thing, is defining what normalcy is for me. I know at the end of the evening when I've got to do bedtime routine and I've got to cook, like typically that's when I'm lower in my energy. So the irritability is going to be higher, right? So what are the things that I can put in place to be able to support me? Maybe that means grandma's going to bring dinner over. Maybe that means their dad is going to send some food. Like, you know, having all these things in place to kind of be able to buffer, because I know at the end of the day, my energy starts to wane, you know, and speaking back to even just the strong archetype. You know, I tell people all the time, being the oldest child and grandchild, like I was born into leadership, right? I was born into, you've got to model, you've got to lead the way. And for a lot of it, that meant ignoring that part of me that was irritable or was exhausted or wanted to say no. You know, and now leading with my mental health first, that does sometimes require that I say, I really would love to, but I can't help today.
I love that. Lead with your mental health first.
And you always tell me no is a complete sentence.
Absolutely.
She overcommits herself. And I'm like,
we're going to talk about that.
I did something good the other day. So she's been talking to me about this for many years. And so one of the things that you're going to talk about is burnout versus stress. And I have felt more recently am I getting to a point of burnout? Because I am, I have a lot of, what is it called? Irons in the fire. Irons in the fire. And I do need to slow down. So somebody called me and asked me if I could take a certain role. And I initially was like, yep, I can do that. And then I said, wait, hold on. Let me go back and say, no, I can't do that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like I'm at capacity is what I said, which is true. I'm at capacity and I'm not sure. And she was here and I was like, aren't you proud of me?
Yeah, we are proud of you.
To you for recognizing that.
Yes.
But that was hard, right? Because my natural intuition is to help people. And I, like you, I love working, whether it's my traditional job, whether it's working on a project, whether it's working on my podcast, whether it's working with my friend to help her through an issue. Like I just love, helping and working.
Yep.
And so it's hard because my desire is really there, but I also haven't always listened to myself, my body, my mind, and I'm starting to do that more.
And something that I would ask that I've also been chewing on lately, because I believe in walking the walk, is why do I truly love to work?
Ooh. Well, I know why Tasha said I need my check every on the 15th and the 30th.
It don't matter where it's at. It could be anywhere. I'm not committed to anybody as long as it comes.
Yes, run me my money.
Well, listen, as you think about it, I'll share with you what I've come to it is that there is that part of me that really desires to feel valued.
That is good.
And to be recognized for that, right? And that is where, and really the question for me was, where is that overworking coming from, right? And so now what I've been having to navigate is how do I recognize and value myself so that it's not so much looking for that to come out
from somebody else,
through
validated
accomplishments,
from someone else.
through work, right?
That's a good question.
Good.
And I think we've had this conversation even here recently because people will question like, well, why would you want something other than what you currently have? Like you make great money and you're doing wonderful and you're respected. And I'm like, but sometimes I don't feel like I'm adding value in the way that I perceive value to be added. And I don't know if that's as much about me, which it maybe is, or if it's about others, like trying to make sure that I'm seeing the value. I don't know. I haven't thought about that much.
And I think the question that I would ask is, and for both of you ladies, it's like, so in that same instance where you're not sure if you're bringing value, does the value have to come from that particular place? Because
you've asked me that.
Because it all because you do so many different things where you're definitely valued. Like, you know what I'm saying? Where you can clearly communicate your value.
Yes.
Like even talking to you today, like I can even communicate to you where your value is. So it's like, does the value have to come from a particular place, or can you absorb and feel that value from other areas as well?
Yeah, I can. I just need to process a little more.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question to ask.
Yeah, it's a good
and
question.
think about. Because although I say that, mine is like, okay, I want to know that my check is coming. It's really deeper than that. I want to make sure that my child is happy,
provided
Absolutely.
for.
and has all the things that he needs.
Absolutely.
And my family, we can do the things that we enjoy. So that's really, for me, it's like
the driver.
Driver.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it started with having
Run me my money. Yes. I think it's similar for me in some respects, but you and I at least have figured out different ways of making money in different spaces, right? And so I don't ever really stress about, am I going to be able to provide for my kids as much? Because even if I lose the job that I have, I feel like I have a skill set.
Right.
Like, we're going to make it happen.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And I've flipped money, Absolutely. So for me, it's less of that. Like, I mean, yes, I want to provide for my kids, all of that. That's not a big concern. That's not a priority. Because I think we're good, you know, that they're good. I don't know. So I think I have a different, but I don't know what it is.
And it's okay. That's something to sit with, you know. But like I said, it's why is the work so important to me? And like I said, I had to be honest with myself about the validation piece that comes from accomplishing, you know, and as they say, once you get to where you're trying to be, that becomes less important. So it's like, okay, now I'm here. Now, what is it really? What is it really? And maybe it's more so of the moments of being able to even just be here with you all and to be able to share in this. Maybe that's what the work is, you know, more important for me here and now.
And I think that strikes me because the thing that gives me joy is like, if she's going through something and I'm there and I can help her and I see the joy after, that is what's important to me. I'm very empathetic. Emotionally, emotion is what I'm driven with, right? Would you agree with that? I don't know.
And it's just a balance, you know, it's a matter of making sure that doesn't come at the cost of you not being able to take care of yourself. You know,
that's true. Because don't make no decision on emotions and they be like, girl. Now, at the end of the day, regardless of what you choose, I know you can make it happen, but I just feel like there's a less stressful path.
I agree. Okay. Thank you. We're having this whole sidebar conversation. Girl, we talk about 18 times. Even this week, she was like, ma'am, you need to call me because we talk every single day. And we have gone several days this week. And she's like,
what is going on?
You already So yes. Okay. So distinguishing though between stress and burnout. What's the difference?
So really, the easiest way to put it is that burnout is going to be when you have that excessive stress to where you don't even have enough of the resources that you need to mitigate that. So as we know, stress is something we deal with on the daily basis. And it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's a motivator to get you to jump or do the thing you need to do, right? Or take care of business. But the problem comes in when that stress is compounding and it's over long periods of time. Right. So I know that if I have an event next week, like I'm going to be a little stressed leading up to that event. But if that feeling and that particular experience is happening week over week, month over month, without giving myself any time or space to be able to come down from that, that is when we really kind of start leading into that burnout.
That's good, girl.
That's good.
Because I know for me, like, and I tell you this all the time, like, I can't do a lot of events back to back to back to back. Like, if I have a Saturday where it's like more than really one event, like I'm starting to get, I start to get stressed out because I can't process all of that. And I do need time to come down from talking to people, even though it's people that I enjoy and love. But even like doing this today, it's like tonight, I need to be able to come down from that.
Absolutely.
So I always ask her, how do you do about 4 events in a day? I'm tapped out just listening.
I'm using the example of an event, but it's really looking at like, I can do short sprints, right? Like we are going to have, especially because we have a lot of things that we are managing and that we're handling. So we're going to have those sprints of times where things are a little bit busier than normal. But it's really for people to be mindful around when that stress is leading to that exhaustion or constantly feeling overwhelmed, or even like the desire to escape is really a huge sign of like, I might be getting up to that burnout and that habitual burnout that we hear about. So, you know, it is fine to have stress. Like we're not going to be stress free. And like I said, in a lot of instances, that stress helps us to get things done and to move forward. But it's when that has become our norm that we start leading into that burnout.
And you said no resources available to alleviate the stress.
Yes. And so the key about it is that resources can be family, friends, it can be finances, but it's going to be those things to help you in decreasing that stress.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
And you have to be open to the idea of asking. You know what I'm saying? Like some people are not even open.
You've got to be open to that. You've got to be open to actually then receiving, the help. For a lot of us that are leaders and have multiple things, especially as Black women, it's hard to let somebody else come in and clean our homes. It's hard to.
I'm like, girl, I don't have a problem at all, girl. Come on, these
but you'd be surprised. Even ordering my groceries and having those delivered.
I love some shipped.
And things like that, because of the belief that we've got to be able to carry it all, that strength has to be shown, that I can handle it.
Yeah.
And if I allow someone else to come in here and do it, then does that make me look weak? How do people perceive that?
And see, that's less of my issue. I'm using the resources, but then I'm filling the space too.
Yes.
I just had groceries delivered, right? And the house cleaners came on Monday.
Yeah.
But I'm doing something else with the time.
Yeah.
I need to not do stuff with the time.
That is why I asked the question of what is the work really about?
Yeah. Okay. Listen, I'm going to message you. I'm going to sit on it in my time that I'm going to create the time. I'm going to text you.
Yes. Because you're achieving for something.
I don't know.
So you got to figure out what is that. Like I said, for me, it's that recognition, it's that validation. So it's like, well, you don't have to keep accomplishing to feel that, to experience that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't have to keep going in order to have access to that.
Yeah. That's good. Woo, child.
That is good. I think, and it was actually just yesterday as I looked at my house, and I feel like I have a 1-year-old.
Yeah.
And I can straighten up, and baby, 2 seconds later, he has this thing he just wants to throw. I said, well, maybe my baby will be a baseball player. Because he will chunk something across the room.
Or a Jalen Hurts or something.
Something quarterback.
Yeah.
Look, because I'll look up, and girl, everything that's where he can reach it is thrown across the room. And I was like, I have to figure something out. If I'm going to show up at work the way that I need to mentally, if I'm going to continue to build, live in the bloom, if I'm going to continue to build, capture this canvas, like I can't do everything.
No.
And it's like, I have to figure out, it's like me and my husband need to, and I think sometimes I was single for so long. I process like still operating single sometimes.
Yes.
And it's kind of more so, it's like, okay, this is kind of like extra. Like, you see what I'm saying? It's like, I'm still...
in a singular mindset.
Yeah, sometimes I am.
Yeah. And it's a transition
mindset. So I even bring him like, look, today I'm going to need your help with doing this. Like, straighten up the living room. I'll get the kids. Like, I have to figure out something. So whether I outsource some things, find some help with my business, like I have to do something different because mentally I'm just not able to do it the way that to the degree where I'm happy with everything.
Yes.
Because it's always like I'm half doing something and I'm spending the energy and time, but I'm never feeling
the result.
Happy. I'm never getting the result that I want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and to put it in perspective, you are still technically going through postpartum if this baby's only one.
Yes.
Yes. It sounds like a full-time, a partnership, and 2 hobby projects that are happening in addition to that, And so a lot of times we really are carrying a lot.
Yeah. And you think like, oh, it's fine. And it's,
it takes a lot of mental space.
Yeah, it takes a lot of space.
It does. And part of that, even for me, has been like, what am I going to eliminate? Because can I do it? Yes. Do I want to? No.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
I don't want to. And I don't have to, really. But somewhere in there, I've had the belief that I've got to keep going.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, having that feeling of like everything is just being half done. So nothing am I showing up in my best in.
Yes.
That's
how I feel, right? That's exactly how I feel like in this moment.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? I feel like I'm showing up half done.
Let me ask you,
half-baked.
What do you need?
I need One, I want to walk in the house and just smell freshness like a clean house. So I guess I need
can get you a linen candle.
Look, I need a housekeeper for one. But I think even deeper than that, I do need a process. Like there are some things like we were talking about, like, okay, putting things away. Yeah. To where it's just, okay, if I have this, put it away, and just maybe small, like what can I do every day?
Yes.
To help with that, right? Implement the habits. So 5 minutes a day when I wake up. So it's not that I need, because let it get to the point to where I need 4 or 5 hours to tackle it. And now I don't have the time.
And that can be very overwhelming as well.
Right. So, 5 minutes a day, so I need to implement some habits for one. Outside of, I do need a maid or somebody to help come clean on a regular basis. But I do need some habits,
some systems,
systems to help with just being organized. I need some organization for sure.
So when you reread Atomic Habits, then write those things that you want to create a system for.
Yeah, I did. And so it wasn't that long ago that I read it. Yeah. And one of the things that I said that I was going to start back doing was like working out like first thing in the morning. Because I know that's really the only time for sure that I can get it done while my baby's still asleep. Wake up that extra 30 minutes if that's all I got. But then while I'm doing that, I can watch my favorite TV show and only watch it during my 30 minutes. So I get my entertainment in. Yeah. And I already get to start my day feeling slightly accomplished because I got my workout.
Yeah. Well, and here's one thing, I'm listening to you. And I really, especially moms and women, I want us to juggle the two first before we throw in the third. So as you talk about everything that you're doing, before we start adding on some other things, what are maybe some things that you do want to reallocate so that can free up? Because we don't want you to get back in that groove of working out and then it starts feeling like a task of something else you have to do when it was intended to be something that was to relieve some stress.
Well, the working out really helps me mentally. So I don't see that as really a task, especially like once I get into the habit of doing it, I see that as something that's helping me really relieve some tension, and I feel better when I do it. And when I look good, I feel good.
That is true.
But to your point, I think it goes back to when I look at everything that I need to get done, I do need to outsource some of the smaller tasks that I do that are just more tedious. Yeah. And even if that means like having somebody come help me with my son in the evenings for a couple of hours.
And that would feel so good.
Yeah.
That would feel so good. I mean, and even when I had kids, we had to a live-in nanny, and people are really shocked by that. But I knew what I needed to show up as the best wife, mom version of myself. And that was something that I needed.
Yeah.
I know the kind of work flexibility that I need to truly be able to show up, so knowing those things about myself. And then I think courageously or unafraidly being able to go and ask for those things and get that.
Yeah. That's good.
That is good. I really want women to not be afraid to ask for help. Or not be afraid that we're going to look some kind of way. And, I can even just think about talking to like cousins and family. And I'm like, why didn't you, say something? Why didn't you ask for help? It's just really hard for us to do that sometimes.
Yeah. And not without reason, a lot of it, like I talked about, we've grown up in the culture that it is glorified if you get it out the mud and you do it by yourself. Right. Yeah. But even in that, I tell people all the time, I'm a Bill Gates scholar. Yeah. Paid for my bachelor's, my master's, my doctorate degree. I did that, right? Yeah. I wrote those 32 pages. Right. But what I also tell people is that I had a high school journalism teacher that sat there with me every step of the way to make sure I got it done. Yeah. So in no area of my life can I say I did that by myself.
Yeah.
And I think we have to realize, like, to your point, the people who are really getting it, they're not doing it by themselves.
No, it's a myth. No. And why would you want to?
Right. Yeah. We don't need to do it by ourselves. But I think because we don't see it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We're not in the spaces where we see it.
Well, we don't talk about it.
And we don't
talk about it.
And
even
we don't
with
talk
your
about
podcast, I'm sure you definitely love to have each other versus one person doing a podcast and doing all the pieces that come along with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so we do have to normalize, and even as leaders in these spaces, seeing people ask for help.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In those things are going to be part of normalizing that for us. And even within our familiar relationships, I talk about that in my TED Talk a bit of, I was asking my in-laws for something that wasn't a strength of theirs. You know? And so, yes, I was met with that rejection, but I was not in tune enough to understand what they are good at, what their skills are.
So when we're asking for help, we need to be aware of what we're asking of that person.
Exactly.
And ask the person, can they even do it?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not a lot of times that nobody wants to help me and I can't get help.
Yeah, they may just not know how.
And they may not be the right person for that.
Right.
I'm not going to call the mechanic to come and, fix the plumbing issue. Like, I'm just not going to do that, you know?
Yeah. That's good.
That's really good.
But we don't think about that. And we know that as leaders, we constantly are having conversations about team dynamics and what's a person's strengths and, all these assessments and things. But when it comes back into our personal lives, even when I was married, it's like, what is his actual strength? You know what I mean? Because not only if I can go and ask him based on what he's good at, he's going to feel good in helping me. I'm going to have that accomplished. And it's not going to be that back and forth of like, well, you didn't do it right. What I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm asking them based on what they are good at.
Yeah.
And I think it's good too, because we had the whole conversation about networking. We have an episode called Networking with Confidence. Matter of fact, I can link it at this point right here. You can just click on it. But I think this is another reason why Black women of color need to network.
Yeah.
Because having that resource that you can think through, like when you need help with something, is really, really critical.
It is. And it's important because even Dr. Amber and I, we met through networking.
Yep.
And you know how I feel about networking. I'm like, oh, this is not.
But you're good at it.
Yeah, but I also felt a connection with her.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I didn't talk to every single person in the room, right? I go comfortably to the person that I'm like, yes, she has a good spirit. She has a good presence about her. And that was good. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think you bring up a good point. Often we are so tired and exhausted. And I had to check in with myself, even when I started having kids, of like, how much are you using that as an excuse to not grow yourself and not do the things that you know you need to be doing? And we can get real comfortable and like, I'm tired. I've had a long day. I'm not going to go out and meet new people, right? Yeah. Or no new friends. I'm happy we are beyond that, right?
Yeah. I'm growing in that area. Live in the Bloom fam. I welcome you. Let's be friends.
Virtually.
Virtually, right? You got to start where you at. You got to start with where you are. But even just that mantra allows us to feel like, well, no, I don't have to go out there and have that courage and meet new people because I've got my few people, but you might find that there are some things you need that, I go down my list and it's like, I need to grow.
Even talking to Jonte and the people that she has met, I feel like she has met some really dynamic women.
Yeah.
And just being open to that, you never know where life can lead you.
Absolutely.
So there are so many women out here doing so many, I say this word a lot, so many dope things. That's my favorite word, dope. Yeah. Everything dope.
Everything.
But there are so many women doing so many dope things, so many dynamic things. It's like you're doing yourself a disservice to not be open to meeting new people.
Yeah. Right. And like I said, rightfully so. When you look back at our history as women in this country, it's been a lot, So those walls and things that are up with reason. But now it's us taking a look at of how much of that is hindering me from the things that I want to grow into.
Yeah.
You know, networking is something that I don't care who it is. It's something we all have to grow that muscle around.
Yeah.
But every time I go and do it, I'm so much more fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I meet wonderful people. I'm here with you all today because of that.
Yeah.
You know, and so really branching out beyond the identity of mom and wife and employee. Why do I like to work?
Yeah.
What do I really need? What do I really enjoy?
Yeah. That's good.
You know?
Okay. So that leads us to connection.
Yes.
So you talk a lot about connection.
Yeah.
How does that tie to burnout? Is that the resource thing again?
That can be one of your resources. But what I found in this journey of working with ERGs and working with employees is that every time I would talk about, you know, so just use your community, use your network as a resource. It'd be like, I don't really have one. You know, that started coming to light. And it's like, well, why don't I? Because I've just got these two friends, right? And what they don't say is I'm burning them out. Because I'm wearing them out with everything that I need, you know?
Yeah.
So then it starts saying, well, let's look at how do we build connection? How do we go out and do some of the things that we're naturally already interested in? I tell people I love coffee. So I'll go to a coffee shop and can meet somebody there.
What?
Because
Wait a minute. You go to Starbucks and then you just start talking to people?
I'll strike up a conversation. Yeah.
She is the friendliest person.
You go, and that's, again, because I'm in the zone or the area of doing something that I love. So I don't know if you all are familiar, Post Oak, the hotel.
Yes.
They have a coffee shop. That is my absolute favorite coffee shop.
Do you know I've never had their coffee?
Oh my goodness, we've got to go.
We've got to go.
Okay.
Okay.
And so what happens for me is at least just being in that ambiance, I'm more open. I'm more receptive.
So how do you start up a conversation with someone?
I might notice your earrings and I'd be like, those earrings are so cute. Pink and green are my colors, right?
Yes.
Crimson and cream are my colors.
Well, you know, everybody can't be first.
But I'll wear a little spring color every now and then.
Yeah.
I love that. We love the divine nine in the house.
Thank you.
We love all the. I love all the divine.
There we go.
We love you too.
You know, but it's not, sometimes we look for it to be prescriptive and it's going to be different for everybody, you know? So I genuinely might notice your earrings and we might strike up a conversation around that.
Okay.
Or like Jonté said, I might be feeling out the energy of a person and it's like, hey, what do you do? You know, I'm interested in learning more about you, you know? So something as simple as that even, it doesn't have to be, it's more about taking the action than like overthinking the steps of like, how do I do? What do I do? Yeah. So I go somewhere that I'm naturally inclined to be open and to be excited to be there.
Okay. But for someone who is more naturally an introvert, who's not going to have that same energy, like when they walk in the room, like what are some baby steps that they can do if they're saying, okay, I'm going to be adventurous today. I'm going to move outside of my normal element.
Yes.
I do like coffee. I'm going to go on over here to Starbucks or Dutch Brothers or whoever, the Post Oak. Like what's something, like what's a little tip that maybe someone can do just to step out their comfort zone a little bit?
Absolutely. So if the first thing is that more than I think about 80% of communication is body language. So making sure that when I go into this place that my body is actually open to talking and to meeting someone.
That's a good tip for people who want to meet.
Exactly.
That's a good tip for women. Women, when you go to these places and you at the bar, you know you want somebody to come say hi. You can't be up there.
Absolutely.
You got to smile.
Absolutely.
Right.
But that's a good tip. So body language, that's good.
That's good.
And I often think about some questions beforehand. You know, if I go into a space, like I said, if I find something on a person, then we can start conversation about that. But I may think about once we introduce ourselves, you know, what's something you've been really excited about here lately? You know, so a way to kind of be able to deepen that conversation as we get started or even to keep it going beyond what do you do?
Okay.
you know? So first you're going to want to try to find some way to initially be able to spark that conversation, whether that be through something you notice about the person, whether they ordered the same drink or a drink you were thinking about even ordering as well.
Okay.
You know, that'll be a great starting point. And then having some questions just kind of that you're curious about other people. Because that connection is not, I think it's hard because often we go into situations like wanting an outcome. But if you were going to the coffee shop and the only outcome is just to meet people, then that kind of opens you up a little bit more. You know, there's not this end goal of I've got to get 50 phone numbers by the end of this event here. It's like I'm genuinely going to just open myself up to meeting people. And events or activities are always good as well.
We need to do a networking event with Amber.
There you go.
Let's do it.
There you go. So that way we can be able to talk about how people can build genuine connection.
Yeah.
I like that.
I think we should do that.
The business and all of that will flow after. But if we lead with, what did I say when I sat down here? I said, I know Jante, but I want to know about you.
Yeah, you did. Right. And I was like, what about me? I don't know.
I'm a mama.
I'm a mama, a wife. I go to work. But I don't think there's much interest in, like from my perspective, it doesn't really seem interesting.
You are a business owner with Capture This Canvas.
Well, and even in that, you know, it's like, what are some things that I want people to know about me beyond what meets the eye?
And not nothing.
Right.
Yeah, these are all things people should think about.
Yeah.
You know? Because even with your jewelry, it's like, now I'm curious of what got you into that.
Yes, www.capturethiscanvas.com.
Yes. And that's another thing, being able to lead with that curiosity, you know? So we talked about body language. We talked about having some questions, that curiosity, but being open as well, you know? And even being resilient. You might go to this coffee shop and not meet anybody.
Yeah.
You know? And so not let that deter you from going back out there and trying it again.
Yeah.
That is connection. But how do you do that and avoid the burnout at the same time, right? Because that's adding something else to the plate.
Yep.
So we've identified
Good
burnout,
question.
right? But so how does that tie together?
Yes. Well, we've got to first look at our capacity. We've got to look at how many slots we really have available. Which is why we kind of talked about if we're adding in the workout, well, what are we taking away? Because it's not just like continually adding, right?
Please call her. Call that lady.
So, you know, what are we going to be? If I've got 4 slots, you know, like.
How are you defining the slots? Is it just like the time or is it like the activities that you have to do? Is it the time frame? How do you define like what is a slot?
Well, so you're looking at the things that take your time and your energy.
Okay.
Right? The things that you have to do. And then what are some of the things that maybe you like to do or want to do? You know what I mean? And so the coffee shop, meeting new people, that's going to be something I want to do.
Yeah.
But maybe in this particular week, the have to do's, because my kids have gymnastics practice, I've committed to this dinner. Like maybe that week, the have to do's, all the slots are full, right? If I know that I've got about 4 hours in me a day to really get things done, what am I using that time for?
Yeah.
And then not, like we talked about, over committing to anything beyond that. And that's when we start going into like our boundaries and just, you know, all of those differing things. But yeah, to some extent, you want to figure out in a week, what does my real capacity look like that feels good to me, you know? And again, none of it's perfect. You will have weeks where you are exhausted to the bone, but to do our best to not allow that to become our norm.
Yeah.
So if you want to add going to the coffee shop into that, do I need to look at, outsource something in that space to be able to slide in the coffee shop?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because again, we're getting away from the idea of trying to carry it all.
Is that like a concept or a name to that? Or is it just
beyond burnout?
No, like the whole process of just, or is it just like time management?
Yeah, I would say it's more so probably time management of looking at, you know, and a lot of the things that we learn on the job in leadership, how can we bring those into our personal lives?
Yeah.
You know, like I said, finding the skill set of the people nearest to us, that's nothing new in the workplace, you know, but how do I be able to bring those concepts into my life? And so with my time management of my personal life, if I know that I only have these 4 hours, how am I going to spend that time?
Yeah.
That's good.
And really, and, you know, to some extent, we talked about the finances and money even. It's like how you balance a checkbook. You've got to balance how much you are giving and or receiving at home as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else that you think would be helpful for our listeners that are navigating spaces of burnout, feeling overwhelmed, and how do they get through that?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we kind of discussed a little bit, but is that safety piece. With feeling safe, with burnout, all of those things, you are going to want to start with what are your needs first. And a lot of times we don't know what that is. And so I may ask the question, well, if there was one thing you could get off of your plate today, what would it be? And then being able to look at the things in the other areas of your life.
Can we spend a little minute on the feeling safe? Only because it came up today. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
Help us understand like what that means and how much of it is any of it like being sensitive or overly sensitive?
So when we look at psychological safety, that is the mental safety, right? Because we know what it means to be physically safe. So when let's just say that mental safety is that I feel safe enough to speak up if something's wrong. I feel safe enough to be able to take risk, right? And so for us, that is still a newer concept.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean that you have to feel?
I think recognizing it, right? Because even early on in my career, like I didn't always speak up because I guess I didn't feel safe
enough to do so.
I guess I was like, you scared. But it was maybe I just didn't feel safe to speak up.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yes. And like I said, it's something that's newer for a lot of us. And so that first thing of what does allow me to feel safe in my interactions. I've had a lot of people say, well, I'm afraid of the judgment that may come from a partner or someone, you know, so that trust then is going to be something that you want to talk about with that person of how do we ensure that there's more trust here, that you really have my best interest and it's not going to be in a space of judging me on what I come to you with.
How do you translate that to the workspace though?
So the workspace is actually, I think, a lot easier because we are looking at the peer-to-peer relationships, but also the relationships with leadership.
Right.
And so it's understanding, one, what are going to be the needs of each person to feel safe enough to get the work done, to speak up, or to take those risks is going to be the first thing. And then looking at the dynamics of the team of what's getting in the way of that safety. So I talked with an organization and they just did some policy changes. But she said, you know, we didn't really take into consideration what the other people's kind of safety needs were. It's not that we have to change what we do or that decisions can't be made, because that will still happen. But it's how do we take others into consideration as the policy changes are occurring.
Okay.
You know, and in recognizing what their needs are. For some people, they just want to be in the know as these things are happening or be aware of them. You know, for others, like we talked about, that value. So how do you ensure that they feel valued even as these changes are happening?
Yeah. Because it's two different, at least two in the workplace. It's from the leadership standpoint, right? Of making sure that your team has a safe space to communicate. And then from the place of me being the employee, how do I navigate that? Because because you can feel like it's not a safe space, but that could be some insecurity there.
And I'm happy you said that.
Right. And so how do you recognize that insecurity to say, hey, lady, it's you.
Yeah.
You got to do some work.
Yeah.
There, right?
And it's probably a few things, you probably are picking up on some things, but it's also could be some of our own biases towards, whatever it might be. And then the third thing that I often say is that thing that you want to experience and feel, for me, it's feeling valued. How am I showing up and giving that? Because a lot of times we'll say, well, this is what I need to feel safe. Well, how are you also giving that need that you have to feel safe in this workplace?
That's a good one.
That is good.
Okay.
So that's just kind of a place for us to be able to start. But really looking at each person and figuring out what is it that you need to feel safe.
Yeah.
And again, it's not to scapegoat that we can't get anything done without you feeling safe. Like, it doesn't have to become that thing, but really just being aware of that, to take that into consideration as things are changing within the workplace.
Which is good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Because in a workplace, you want people to feel safe with giving their ideas and speaking up, because that's how you grow as a business. And the personal relationships, going back to what you were saying, is the trust issue in the personal space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So some folks that need to trust each other.
I know.
Yes. And
work it out.
It's a challenge,
Little Miss Mediator over here.
It's a challenge. So those would be some of the things. And I also think, again, we've talked about it throughout this, but really accepting that I have those floor slots. I have a limit. I have a capacity.
Yeah, I need to identify those slots. That's what I'm going to do tonight.
Yeah, identify the slots
what
while
slots?
I'm thinking about what my job is. And we'll talk about it.
We've given y'all some homework, some things to think about.
Back to Dr. Amber on this, okay?
So Dr. Gunner, you are mostly, so do you share this amazing information more so in corporate America, or do you do it on the individual level, or is it a combination of both?
So really my target is corporations, is leadership, because again, they model, they set the standard, and then that filters down into all of the employees. So really being on a mission to ensure that the workplaces can be safer for everybody. And then also being able to prevent a lot of the burnout by us knowing what our signs are, but also the people in our lives that can be of support based on their strengths as well within that. So I do work within organizations, within ERGs, and then also being able to offer coaching within those organizations as well to help their leaders.
Okay, what's ERG?
Employee resource groups.
Okay.
Yep. Or like business development groups.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So all the businesses, you hear this, you better reach out.
Absolutely.
How can they get to you?
Yes. So I would love for everybody to connect with me through LinkedIn. You can do that at Dr. Amber Gunner, as well as visiting the website, which is www.ambergunner.com.
Okay.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that we got to flow with it, and see where the conversation took us. And I think we all have some homework.
I know. It was good. Thank you. So I'll be texting you. Dr. Amber, I got it.
Absolutely.
I think I know what the problem is.
All right, Bloom fam. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And if you have any questions for Dr. Gunner, make sure you leave them in the comments, and we'll be sure to get those answered. And I don't think this will be the last of you.
Well, I hope
Look, we got to pull you into this. We got to pull you into this circle.
Yes.
Pull you into the Bloom fam.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Bloom fam.
Have a good one. Bye.